much of a startup's focus should be or resources should be allocated towards the PR? Like, do you have any benchmarks that a typical startup should put up set number of resources for their PR effort? Like, do you have any such benchmarks that you could
Yeah,
share?
I mean, that's tough to answer because it depends upon the kind of company you are and what stage you're at. I mean, I've seen seed round funded companies spend $10,000 to $15,000 a month because it was a B2C play, and they need to educate a market about a disruptive technology, so they needed to make that investment. But I've also seen $3,000 or $4,000 a month until the company has more of its assets in place. And sometimes it's not PR at all. Sometimes you don't want PR because you don't want to announce that you have these executives or that you got this funding, because the competition will start to sniff around, and snoop around and maybe make things difficult for you. So sometimes it's better to just start to create a little bit of content on LinkedIn, get a few articles published maybe, but not start to go big and talking to reporters, all the time. So there is no one size fits all here. Most, I would say most startups start off with an in-house person just banging out some copy, right? And then you go from there.
That's a fair point. And I'm curious. So, in your journey helping out a lot of businesses, can you walk us through some of the success stories where you were impressed with what the startups were doing? Like some of the innovative ways they are making themselves, their presence felt in the industry, and if you can walk us through some of those cases, if you have anything to share on that.
Yeah, I mean, some of these examples, might be a little bit older now, but there's always a degree of complexity involved with each one of them. So I'll give you two examples. In the 1990s, was my first client. It was PeopleSoft, which made HR software, but it was based on a new computing platform, which was called client-server computing, right? And they had a more complicated message to tell that needed to be urgently told and simplified in order to get customers to want to even take a look, because everybody was on a mainframe back then. And PeopleSoft was not the safe buy. IBM is the safe buy, and that saying, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM, right? But what PeopleSoft did, and what a lot of other companies back then did, was very clearly and simply lead off not with who they were, but how they were doing things differently and what problem they were solving, right? And why that problem was not being solved by other solutions. And by leading with that, they immediately connected with the pain factor that prospects had and were able to draw them in. The second thing they did was in creating a new category of enterprise software. They also really leveraged their culture and their values. So PeopleSoft CEO was a man named Dave Duffield, who was already an accomplished software executive. And he really led the charge in Silicon Valley at that time, when values and culture were not a thing. They were not important. And he really, he didn't use it as a marketing strategy on purpose. It was really just who he was. And he became known for that. And then it became like, wow, this company's culture is amazing. And they care about their customers so much. They were like the white horse, and everybody thought they were the darling. But it was because they stood for quality customer service and innovation, and because their executive team all kind of embodied the same purpose and vision. So it was a smashing success, right? Other companies use a different approach, and they're the dark horse, and they sling mud at the competition, and they use competitive warfare and guerrilla warfare, and and they have a reputation for that. It doesn't mean that they weren't successful. Some of them did achieve success with that, But you attract a certain kind of customer that way. And, it's your brand and it's your reputation. And I would give one more example, if you like. More recently, Forbes, we know Forbes magazine, they went through a huge transformation of their business from being a print publisher to digital publishing, and they had to change their entire business model in order really to survive. Right? Mm-hmm. Forbes also was a family-run business, and had kind of more of a reputation that had perhaps stagnated a bit and wasn't fresh or innovative anymore. So they brought along a man named Mike Perlis, who was the first non-family member CEO. And he engineered this whole digital transformation and this strategy over a number of years. And the challenge was that we had to get the reporters who were being laid off to write the story about this, right? Because at that time, right, a lot of companies in the publishing industry were letting go of their long-standing reporters. USA Today, Dow Jones. I mean, all of these magazines, right, many of them, Fortune, Time, Newsweek, they all shrunk their staff as the industry changed. And so the challenge was to find someone who would take a meeting and would listen to the story that we had to tell. So ultimately, it was a success because the transformation used good technology, the strategy was well executed, and they were sold to, I believe, a Chinese holding company, and the family still owns a small percentage of it. So two very different examples, right? But at the end of the day, it all came down to sort of like, what is our strategy? What are our core values, and what are we going to stick to, right? That's important. And it takes so much time. It's when you're a startup, you just rush, and you don't have a degree of time, but building a brand and changing market perception takes time and building credibility.
And I'm curious. So when someone approach you for they're needing some PR help, they're needing some brand perception built and all, have you ever rejected someone saying, no, you're not designed, or you are too hard to deal with? Like, do you have certain stories that where either the culture is the bottleneck, or like help us understand the structure of an organization that's very hard to do the PR for?
Yeah. I mean, like, how much time do you have? Because I have so many stories. Like, yes, absolutely. I mean, in a way, we became sort of like a venture capitalist, right? You interview your prospects, to see if their strategy is viable. And, they think, oh, just, go make us be larger than life and, spin the story. Well, like, no, like, when is your product shipping? Who is using it? How much money do you have in the bank? Sometimes we even asked for their business plan, and we spoke to their venture capitalists to understand why they invested in these companies. And sometimes, yes, we turned them down because either their strategy we felt was too much like many other companies, and it would be too difficult to make them stand out, that they didn't have enough of a differentiating message, right? Or their ideas were simply crazy or unethical, right? Like we thought there's no way we can be successful for, company ABC. Because right, at the end of the day, we have to not only protect our own reputation, but we present these stories to the press and to analysts with whom we have very hard-won and trusted relationships, and you can blow it with one company. So we have to give them, good information so they can do their jobs too. And there were times we fired clients. I mean, clients where there was CEO turnover, or they were abusive to the staff. During the recession when money was tight, I had no problem saying, see ya, because you don't get to treat my people that way.